Hello, One Great Earth. My name is Dan. I appreciate you being here today with me. We got a lot to get into, and sadly, it has a lot to do with the state of Florida. The state of the state of Florida is they are doubling and tripling down on what you can and cannot say, to the point that it's affecting being able to report accurately on the news. This is climate change is not going away. Stop making it worse, Florida. Tom Zipoli, you can't ignore the damage caused by climate change. This is commentary from the Baltimore Sun. If you say it, does it go away? Republican governors are going out of their way to avoid the reality of climate change and its impact on their state's citizens. Some have decided to deal with the problem by removing the words climate change from the state vocabulary. Last month, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who refers to himself as not a global warming person and who considers climate change legislation too woke, put his signature to a new law that erases references to climate change from state documents. The law changes Florida's energy policy so that reducing planet warming pollution is no longer a priority. It also restricts offshore wind development, removes a requirement from state-purchased vehicles be fuel efficient, and deletes previous clean energy goals. DeSantis said his new law would protect Florida from green zealots. Florida experienced its hottest year on record in 2023, and more records will be broken as temperatures reached 115 degrees in Key West this past month. Last week, Sarasota had a record 8 inches of rain in 3 hours, and areas around Miami had over 12 inches of rain in 24 hours. Many parts of Florida experienced widespread flooding, and DeSantis declared a state of emergency for multiple counties. Yet during his news conference, he continued to deny that record heat and rain in Florida has anything to do with climate change. We don't want our energy policy driven by climate ideology, he said. Patricia Mazzei, a New York Times journalist from St. Petersburg, Florida, has been meeting with residents on the west coast of Florida and has documented regular flooding of their homes. Hurricane Idalia landed 200 miles north of St. Petersburg in August 2023. Still in one neighborhood around St. Petersburg, 1,200 out of the 2,600 homes flooded. Many flooded a second time during a rainstorm in December and again during this last week's record rainfall. Many neighborhoods in Florida don't even need a hurricane or a storm to flood. Their streets flood with each high tide. Unfortunately, the tides are getting higher as sea levels rise. As climate changes lead to higher sea levels and more frequent and intense storms, many more neighborhoods in Florida are expecting to become vulnerable to flood risk. Sea levels in southern Florida have risen 8 inches in the past 30 years, according to Brian McNulty, a senior research associate at the University of Miami School of Marine, Atmospheric, and Earth Science. That pace, he says, is expected to speed up dramatically. In the future, McNulty expects sea levels in Florida to rise another foot in the next 30 years and will continue to accelerate after that. Regardless of these predictions, DeSantis' bill gives builders in South Florida permission to use lower sea level rise scenarios in their planning, even though these conservative predictions have been proven inaccurate. This ensures flooding for more Florida residents, even in new housing that should be built with more updated flooding models. While DeSantis and the state of Florida are ignoring the problem, local cities and towns must deal with the reality of the flooding on the ground. The city of Miami, for example, is already spending billions of dollars to keep its streets from flooding during high tides. They are installing street drains with one-way valves and pumps to keep seawater from flowing back into the city. But these short-term fixes will not hold the sea back as it rises several more feet over the next 60 years as predicted. With a 2024 hurricane season predicted to produce a record 17 and 25 named storms this summer, Floridians are getting nervous about their properties. and insurance companies are raising rates or leaving the state. Several large insurance companies have already left. This, they say, contrary to DeSantis, is in response to stronger storms and flooding due to climate change. 14 other insurance companies, according to Florida Department of Financial Services, are going out of business. It only takes one big storm to bankrupt an insurance company. In 1992, when Hurricane Andrew cost $26.5 billion USD in damages, 11 of the 30 insurance companies doing business in Florida went bankrupt. Doesn't that mean they just don't want to pay out? Not that they're going bankrupt because, never mind. This sounds weird. Don't trust it. I don't. As more companies move out of state or close, homeowners are finding it difficult to find new coverage at affordable rates. While some residents are moving, the few who can afford it are elevating their homes or rebuilding them higher. However, many residents who live in flood zones don't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars required to elevate their homes or rebuild. They are stuck. How do you solve a major state problem when the governor doesn't allow state agencies to even name the issue, never mind developing policies or funding projects to address it? Like the storm drain funding that DeSantis cut? That would have helped out parts of Miami-Dade that flooded horribly, exponentially. How do you solve a problem? The Tampa Bay Times reported last week that DeSantis vetoed about $205 million USD in water infrastructure funding, stormwater management, local sewage systems, and water treatment plants around the state. If you ignore it, will it go away? Former President Donald Trump tried that for 4 years when he was in the White House. His administration deleted the term climate change from federal government websites. Let's just say that Trump's avoidance of the climate change crisis worked as well as his avoidance of the COVID-19 crisis. You can pretend it's not a big deal, but you can't fool Mother Nature. Michael Garrett, founder of the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University, said DeSantis has gone further than any other state in repealing its existing climate laws. They should be the last state to stand in the way of fighting climate change, writes Gerard. Florida is one of the most vulnerable states in the country. All of South Florida is at great peril from sea level rise. I'm half expecting DeSantis to outlaw the world's rain and flooding next. After the severe rainstorms caused major flooding in southern Florida last week, DeSantis encouraged Floridians to apply for federal assistance. Really? Why should the rest of us pick up the tab for his poor leadership and planning? So Republicans have no problem taking handouts whenever it's from failure from their own policy makers. It's awful for everybody in Florida, and I know not everybody in Florida is crazy. At least I used to think not everybody in Florida was crazy. But this should be bigger. But since you can probably legally shoot protesters in Florida, I don't know if people are actually protesting anymore, or if they can, or if they just get arrested immediately or shot. You know, a good Samaritan. Florida is losing ground, literally. Florida is swimming. It is imperative that they brace themselves to what's to come. I'm not going to fearmonger. I am not going to name the storms predicted, because we already had that 91L, I think it was, that came through last week, and you see how much rain that dropped. This is not to be ignored, because ignoring it means you're just going to find yourself in it unexpectedly, because you just want to be surprised, right? That's what it is. You want to ignore climate change. Either you're on the left or you're on the right. I get arguments with everybody from climate change. They all have different ideas, different beliefs, different responses to disasters. But largely, I find that the denialism from climate change, the hatred you receive from climate deniers, is so virile that I don't know if there could be hope. Because we're talking about Florida here. Their government has gone full anti-woke. Climate change is woke somehow because the weather is gay. These are things that I've heard, just in the grapevine. They want to ignore what's to come. And they're deliberately allowing construction companies to build residential buildings without care of modern sea level where it's at, and anticipation of further sea level rise. That means that building has a chance of collapsing. We've seen that before with just a little bit of water in a pool. Elected officials in sweltering U.S. states prioritizing fossil fuel cash over people. Governors of Florida, Texas, Louisiana, and Nevada have all received money from oil and gas firms as residents suffer. Elected officials in states baking under sweltering temperatures, including Florida, Texas, and Louisiana, are prioritizing their donors from planet-warming industries instead of protecting their constituents, advocates say. Florida has already seen unprecedented heat this year, with several cities breaking daily heat records this month. And again, we're not saying that individual cities haven't had days this hot before. That's not how this works. You gotta take like your whole arm and go over the United States and like, okay, this whole Midwest to East side is currently burning up. That's a lot more than just one city, isn't it? It doesn't work. Stop using that as an example as to, I really do see this in the both left and right, the level of climate denialism. And if there is one thing that I can believe that will unite Republicans and Democrats, it's anti-climate change rhetoric. It might be worse than the other. One was definitely worse than the other, not a doubt, because you can't just say it doesn't exist and you don't want anybody talking about it. Ban books that have anything related to it, and ban even your meteorological networks on TV from being able to talk about it. You're losing your beaches. You're losing your sand. Sand that corporations are pumping out from underneath the sea onto their ships because sand is that much more in need. Probably due to luxuries, people needing beaches. But these beaches that people visit are usually very much so man-made, man-created. The platform the sand sits on, all that sand can just get pulled right out of that. There isn't much holding it back. You can comb the sand, you can take care of it, but it's still going away, because once the sea level rises just a little bit more, Florida's going to see a lot of shocking developments. A lot of shocking developments that have been predicted, that have been said for months and months and months. Why are you ignoring climate change? Why are you banning climate change? Why can't anybody talk about climate change? Because it doesn't exist, or it's too woke? These are not answers people should be giving for censorship. Regardless of which side you stay on, are you okay with Florida censoring climate change? I don't think many people would be okay if you replace climate change with something they were interested in. Something involved the planet, like, okay, you can't have children. Because that's what they're telling us. They're telling us that we can't have children any longer because the world is not going to be suitable for life as we know it. And that's a very key important term there, as we know it. They know that this world is seeing an unprecedented amount of heat rising, and it's barely just scratching the surface of the air. We look at the other side of the world and we see temperatures at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Do we not believe that that is going to happen to us? Please mark my words here. I do not want to see people suffer. I don't want to see people harmed. But the denialism is getting so out of hand. Somebody getting a real bad sunburn is the least of the concerns of what we're talking about here. Make the jokes as much as often as you like to deflect and push away the reality of climate change. It is going to get worse because it has to get worse because it's already been getting worse. We're at month 13 of the hottest on record globally. Not just in the United States, not just in Florida, not just in North America, but globally. This is a big deal, bigger than what people would like to make it out to be. Because panic. They don't want to sow panic. I don't want to sow panic. But we're seeing it happen in front of us. Rainstorms are amplified by climate change. It's not like where you get rain, you're suddenly going to start getting snow instead of precipitation. That's not how this works. We're talking about rainstorms that would be included within the budget of the year, of the storm budget of Florida every year. But these storms that are unnamed become as strong as a Category 2 hurricane. Systems like that happen all the time. And for it to dump a foot of water without as much as letting up for 2 hours, that's an insane amount of precipitation. And there's no pumps that can really deal with this. And where are you going to pump all the water? It's an entire city underwater, an entire village. We're running out of time. Not to stop everything. No, our time to stop everything, to stop these processes from happening, it might be too late. You see, underwater trawling of the ocean floors kicks up massive amounts of carbon dioxide. Massive amounts of carbon dioxide. But it's slow. It takes 100 years for particles from on top of the surface of the ocean to wind up on the bottom of the ocean floor. It takes between 9 to 10 years for ocean trawling to kick up carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So one of these months, we're going to be like, okay, the carbon budget is this. And then suddenly, we see a huge spike in emissions. Where'd it come from? We don't know. It's over the ocean. These things we didn't know existed now are ruining our total carbon budget in the atmosphere. And these are the sins of our forefathers and our grandfathers and our fathers and even today, because we're still trawling the sea floors, which means that we're still kicking up a lot of carbon dioxide that will eventually find its way into the atmosphere, further exacerbating the problem of fossil fuel burning. No one's telling you to stop driving a car. No one's telling you anything, really. What we're saying is that climate change is here. It exists. We've been tracking this for months. It is a complex issue to deal with. You see how much I have to go over just to try to get an idea of what's going on. It's very complex. But I hope I am doing a good job in relaying this message to people, because I don't think enough is being said or done regarding climate change. It is an always on topic. It's never slowing down. And it's not until we see tremendous disaster do we start to believe. And I mean tremendous disaster. I don't mean just a storm washing Fort Myers away. We're talking about tremendous, unparalleled disasters that I'm not going to speculate on, because it is the loss of human life and property. That is not something to speculate on. That's something companies will do, to speculate on if they want to continue insuring the region or not. They are more likely to bow out. When the insurance companies are leaving in droves, you have to wake up. You have to see the reality of this is going on right under us, right under our noses. And what was going to happen in another 5 years? Where is our coastlines going to be pushed back to? We're seeing a lot of people say like oceanfront property. It's deeper than that. The sea level rise means that deeper than oceanfront property. Talking about huge amounts of flooding in South Florida is literally just ripe for flooding in 3 different directions. Now, north, flooding north, east, and west. Florida is incredibly vulnerable, and which is why we monitor Florida, because their mangroves are gone. They're losing a lot of seagrass, which a lot of animals and ducks feed on. Their pollution is becoming heavier for a lot of reasons. So what are we looking at here? Elected officials in states baking under sweltering temperatures, including Florida, Texas, and Louisiana, are prioritizing their donors from planet-warming industries instead of protecting their constituents, the advocates said. Florida has already seen unprecedented heat this year. Louisiana. The state's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis accepted over $1 million USD from energy companies in the 2020 election cycle and nearly $2 million from agribusiness, another top contributor to the climate crisis. Last month, DeSantis embarked on a campaign to scrub most references to climate change from state law. The very day DeSantis signed the bill into law, Key West registered a heat index of 115 degrees, tying with the highest reading on record for any time of the year. The right-wing governor also came under fire in April when he signed a law preventing Florida municipalities from creating heat protections for workers. It makes me sick. Regardless how you see the climate and where it's changing to, making it unsafe for workers is not okay. It should not be okay. But voting for Republicans, voting for right-wing politicians is only going to be a detriment to those that work. The legislation, which will go into effect on July 1st, was seemingly a response to Miami-Dade County's farm workers' efforts to enshrine rights to mandatory rest breaks, access to water and shade, and other heat protections. The cruel policy will boost the profits of business interests, including from major agricultural and construction firms who have contributed to DeSantis and will have particularly egregious effects for the state's largely immigrant agricultural workforce, said Ernesto Ruiz, researcher at the Farm Workers Association of Florida. Most of those workers are subject to a draconian, regressive, and exploitative wage structure that bases compensation on numbers of crops harvested rather than hours worked, and many are forced to wear long sleeves of protection from the pesticides that are used widely. Yeah, long sleeves aren't going to protect you from the pesticides. These are very too late. We also hear from hundreds of farm workers that are purposely dehydrating themselves to avoid having to go to the bathroom, which can be 10 to 25 minutes away. The sponsors in DeSantis can only get away with this law because they have what they view as an unending, disposable labor force. On Monday, Kathy Castor, a Democratic representative from Florida, urged federal officials to finalize federal workplace heat protections. In signing the law barring the creation of municipality heat protections, DeSantis followed the right-wing leader of another rapidly warming state, Texas, where a heat dome brought triple-digit temperatures earlier this month. Amid similarly sweltering temperatures last June, Greg Abbott, the Texas governor, signed a similar bill into law, outraging climate and labor activists. It's inhumane and cruel, one Texas outdoor worker told The Guardian at a time. Environmentalists have been criticized Abbott in recent years for barring municipalities from enacting bans on planet heating gas and new construction and vowing to exclude renewable energy from economic incentive programs. Abbott accepted over $7.5 million from fossil fuel companies. Oh, that's cool. How much have you accepted from fossil fuel companies? Is it $1 million? Is it $5 million? Is it closer to $8 million like Abbott? $7.5 million he was given, bribed, to continue this war on renewable energies. He doesn't care. He's being paid to deliberately not care. If he wasn't being paid, he would not be a voice for this movement. People would not be so upset if they didn't have their sellout heroes, politicians, as their voice. It's disgusting and repugnant. $7.5 million Greg Abbott has received so far that we know of. And people want to defend him because he's right-wing and Republican conservative. He's being paid to share your beliefs. It's much different than somebody you've seen from the ground up, from grassroots. No, this is being paid to care. He would not care about your life. He does not care about the safety of your children. We know that with gun laws and laws of economic reform, he wants to make it harder to be a worker. He thinks asking for a drink of water is weakness. When him using a wheelchair, I'm not even going to get into it. I still don't think he's disabled. I think that's probably my only conspiracy theory that I have, is that Greg Abbott, Governor Greg Abbott, is not disabled below the waist and he can walk. Somebody should surprise him by throwing a snake on him and seeing what happens if he gets up. But maybe he goes all the way and he numbs his legs before he goes out every day. He's a terrible person. You see how that just isn't even that far beyond a grasp of such a person. It's disgusting and repugnant. And I wish I probably didn't say it, but there you go, I did say it. It is my conspiracy theory. It is shared by many. And who knows, maybe after he's done governing, he's just going to get up and walk off stage and not say a word. And everybody's not going to be surprised. I don't want to believe he's not disabled, you know? But I have no data to back it up. I have no proof. I don't have a picture of him standing up somehow, even if I could try to make it in Photoshop. But that's why I call it a conspiracy theory, because there is no reflection of reality that supports my theory. Is that he's not disabled? Doesn't matter what I believe. He's still in a wheelchair. You see how not believing in something doesn't make it go away? Just that I don't believe somebody's disabled doesn't mean they're just going to be able to stand up because, oh, well, until somebody didn't believe that, you know, they're not going to care. Oh, I didn't know that was a bad thing to do. Oh. You can't just wish it away. You have to work at it. Just like him in a wheelchair, he has to work at it. But being paid $7.5 million from fossil fuel companies to do what he's done in the state, especially against workers, it's disgusting. No one should be voting for this man just because he's a Republican. Just because he's a Republican? Because there's an R next to his name, that's the only reason he gets to vote. He's in the NRA, and that's the only reason he gets to vote. These shouldn't be, these are antiquated. We don't need the NRA. We need the EPA to be fully funded and actually being able to tell us what's happening. But the EPA has just been largely neutered to the point that I don't think they're going to be able to get it back federally. I don't think we're ever going to get back to a point where we have testing on grounds like Superfund sites. Instead, we give people millions of dollars to manage, oversee the Superfund site. There's just money everywhere, and it is really impressive to still take almost $8 million from fossil fuel companies. But made the sector the biggest industrial contributor to his campaign. That wasn't it. That wasn't all. Representatives for DeSantis and Abbott did not respond to requests for comment. Another rapidly warming state, Nevada, scorched under high temperatures this past weekend with more extreme heat expected this week. Last year, Joe Lombardo, the governor of Nevada, vetoed a bill that would have required 2 counties to adopt heat mitigation priorities into their development plans. Asked for comment about the policy, Lombardo's office referred to the Guardian's governor's veto message, which said the bill would have created significantly more red tape for master plan projects in 2 of Nevada's fastest growing counties. A far-right Republican, Lombardo had accepted campaign donations from utilities that provide gas, including Southwest Corporations and NV Energy. DeSantis and Abbott and Lombardo have all endorsed Donald Trump for president, whose extreme anti-environment views have sparked fear among experts and climate activists. This month, 24 people were sent to the hospital from an Arizona Trump rally, which was held in the triple-digit heat, outside in the triple-digit heat. The former president made headlines when he told the crowd, "I don't care about you, I just want your vote." Trump told all Americans what DeSantis, Lombardo, and Abbott have been telling workers for years. "I don't care about you," said Alex Glass of the climate advocacy nonprofit Climate Power. She added that the 3 governors care so little about residents of their states that they are passing policies guaranteeing that more people will suffer. Extreme temperature warnings are also in place in Louisiana, where Jeff Landry, the governor, is also known for his anti-climate agenda and his loyalty to the fossil fuel sector. Landry, who has also endorsed Trump, has appointed many former gas, oil, and coal executives to crucial environmental positions within his administration, and has taken more campaign donations from oil and gas companies than any other industry. Landry's office did not respond to requests for comment. Studies show that a warming climate often poses the largest economic risks to red states, but some Democrat-controlled states are also harshly impacted by warming summer temperatures. Some leaders in those states have failed to enshrine heat protections too. In California, where warm summer temperatures are fueling wildfires, the Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom, angered advocates in April when he exempted people in prison from proposed state rules to protect indoor workers from extreme heat. The unexpected carve-out will also further delay the implementation of the long-awaited standards. But advocates also say workers, including those in prison, need the protections immediately. Temperatures were tight or broken in parts of the state last week, and much of the state is still broiling under extreme heat this week. Samantha Leos of the State Labor and Workforce Development Agency said state officials and the Newsom administration have worked hard to implement the new protections, which she said will be in place this summer. She says the revised proposed text will go to a vote on June 20th, and the state will continue its work in parallel to develop heat regulations for prisons and local jails. Phoenix, Arizona, America's hottest city, is also experiencing searing heat this week. Elected officials in the city and state have touted their climate plans, but late last month, the majority Democrat city council in Phoenix passed restrictions on the places where people experiencing homelessness can camp. Housing advocates say the move could make it more difficult for a population already severely impacted by extreme heat to access much-needed shade. Christian Courtier, a public information officer for Phoenix, said the city conducts proactive outreach across the city to help individuals quickly connect with appropriate resources and has been rapidly expanding access to shelters. She added that officials are doing more for heat relief than ever before. Research shows that heat waves are becoming more severe and prolonged due to climate crisis, which is primarily caused by the burning of fossil fuels. Great article. It's from the Guardian, from Darna Noor. Just massive amounts of politicians have been getting huge payouts and bribes. And there's no way around that, because when you have a cult that is obsessed with protecting the people that have an R by their name, because if I find somebody in the Democratic Party is taking massive amounts of fossil fuel money, it's the same. It's not any better or worse, it's the same. But the messaging that comes out of the mouth of the politician that's taking the money is different. But largely, it equals to denialism regardless. So everybody sucks. We're watching the world heat up at a rapid rate. And we don't know if the 14th month, that's going to be the 14th consecutive month on record, will be the hottest 14th month on record. But it's already been the 13th month. So why should we say that this isn't going to be the 14th month on record? We have only evidence on the contrary that it's only going to heat up and get hotter. In states like Florida right now that are enjoying a little bit of a lull in temperature, it's going to be unbearable. People are going to suffer and people are going to be harmed greatly. And that is of a great reason why we're talking about this today. It is not to offend anybody of any particular belief or any political ideology at this point. But the people that you get your messaging from, your signaling from, are getting paid millions of dollars to get people like you to do it for free. Don't work for free. It is amazing just how much people come out of nowhere when you talk about climate activists and climate rights, and then somebody uses cornstarch and water to spray some rocks, and suddenly that is just like the term eco-terrorist. People just discovered it and they want to be hateful as much as they can about it. These corporations that you're defending by defending the politicians that are taking all the money, are you taking the money? Are you getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars? I don't think you are. And if you were, you probably wouldn't be out there on the front line against the protesters. You wouldn't be recording their faces, taking their names when you can. The right wing is bringing apart, taking apart any sense of reality in Florida. This is what happens when they are in power. This is what happens. If you have a child, you have nephews, nieces, son or daughter, it is in your best interest not to have children. I will repeat that, probably a little differently. It's okay not to have children because these politicians are telling us that everything's so bad that they don't have to pay attention to it anyway. They're getting paid so much money. You're not, though. You're going to have to struggle. You're going to have to suffer. Why? So much money goes to so many people in Florida throughout the entire state that nobody on the top surface believes anything. So that kind of knowledge trickles down, and it trickles down as some kind of rage, because the people that are below it that are doing this for free, by the way, because if you're doing this as a antagonist against protesters, you're doing this for free. And if you're getting paid, I think you need to fess up and say, like, how do you get hired here? Because I think a lot of people would be very interested in knowing. Like, where can I get paid to? I'm sure there are still places available where you can go out and bang some protesters around. Not in the groups that they were before, but Florida has been largely unkind to protesters on both sides. It doesn't matter which side you're on, protesting is not allowed. Florida reefs are in trouble. Could the answer lie in coal from the Caribbean? Yeah, there we go. Miami. Off the northern coast of Honduras, thick stands of endangered elkhorn coral have mysteriously defied warming oceans fueled by climate change to blanket the reef with healthy cocoa brown colonies branching towards the water surface like antlers. Reefs near the small colonial town of Tila have more than 3 times the amount of live coral found elsewhere across the Caribbean. Now scientists at the University of Miami Rosenthal School hope to unlock that secret and crossbreed the sturdier coral with Florida elkhorn as they work to buy more time for a shrinking reef battered by rising ocean temperatures and disease. Usually, we associate reefs with crystal clear water and lovely temperatures. These are rough, tough reefs, said Andrew Baker, a Rosenthal coral biologist leading the research. There are enormous stands of elkhorn corals and great coverage of other corals. It's kind of a mystery why the corals are doing so well. In Florida and around the planet, oceans absorb more than 90% of additional heat trapped by greenhouse gases. The extra heat is decimating reefs. Record heat last year triggered a global bleaching event, which is take a look at the currents here in Florida. Now, bleaching. This is happening now. There isn't anything that can be done about it anymore. This is happening. The Gulf of Mexico and the eastern seaboard and the northeast are going to be experiencing the worst bleaching I think they have ever experienced. Because most of the world have experienced the worst bleaching they've experienced on record. So it's only a matter of time before the Gulf of Mexico and south of Florida and east of Georgia, going up all the way to Nova Scotia. In Florida last summer, coral turned a ghostly white when a blistering heat wave caused them to spit out their life-sustaining algae and bleach. Coral reef bleaching to a human being would be equivalent to heat stroke. You remember that. Is that heat exhaustion is when you're sweating. Heat stroke is when sweating no longer gives you the benefit of cooling down. With waters around the state hitting record highs again this summer, Baker and a team of students flew to Honduras in May to scout out what he hopes could be the parents of new, more resilient Florida coral. At 4 a.m. one June morning, they rose to be on the reef at daylight to collect the coral. Once packed in wet paper towels and sealed in bubble wrap, Baker and his team loaded the coral into 6-pouch-sized coolers to be whisked back to Miami aboard a donated Amerijet cargo flight. "It's been a long day," Baker said 14 hours later, standing on the tarmac at Miami International Airport, waiting to clear customs as the evening sun turned the sky pink. Baker's biggest worry was temperature. Pilots set the cabin temperatures at 77 degrees, but 14 hours is a long time, even for sturdy coral. Baker was confident the 2 species of brain coral would survive the trip, but he was less certain about the elkhorn. "For those elkhorn corals, the ones we've actually most interested in, they are notorious for not traveling well," Baker said. "Amerijet workers have shipped whales, dolphins, and even giraffes in the spacious Boeing 767 freighters jets, but never coral. They quickly ferried the coolers through a warehouse as big as 6 football fields to a waiting truck for the half-hour drive to tanks outside Baker's long lab aside Biscayne Bay." And Biscayne Bay is a hot topic that we've been talking about lately as well. I didn't see that it appeared in this article, but dead fish are just washing up, popping up everywhere. And there's a certain percentage, like 10%, that we're seeing on the surface that actually is dead. So you can imagine just how much worse it gets under the water in the lagoons and the beaches and the rivers, and especially in the bay. That bay is ground zero for fish death. Clouds of mosquitoes mobilized as the students and Baker unloaded the coolers for the moment of truth. "All right, here we go," Baker said as he cracked open the first cooler. "There's that smell." A sweet, salty scent, like sea scallops, wafted out, signaling they'd survived being packed in a cooler for hours, bumped around on forklift, and jostled by airport workers. Within a day, after most had acclimated to their new home, the coral were removed from their outdoor raceway tanks to an indoor spawning facility. Altogether, 37 colonies of elkhorn and brain coral made the journey. To improve the chances for success, Baker gave 7 elkhorn to the Florida Aquarium, where scientists have been successfully breeding coral. This is the first time coral has been brought into the U.S. to attempt breeding more resilient babies, Baker said. The idea of using foreign coral to do this has raised concern over mixing genetics. Still, the concerns don't outweigh what's at stake. Elkhorn that once blanketed Florida reefs have nearly disappeared in the state. What remains was hit hard by last summer's heat wave. It took a year just to obtain permits to bring the coral into the United States, Baker said. If he succeeds at breeding them, he'll need to secure more state and federal permits to plant them on Florida's reefs. Baker hopes to have the coral spawn in July or August, when Florida coral typically spawn. He can then crossbreed them and have babies growing while he works through the permitting process. Baker ultimately hopes he can fast-track an evolutionary process now being outpaced by climate change. "We can't just wait for the solution to be ready and then think, okay, now, what do we do now? What do we do to save these ecosystems?" he said. "We've got to work now, to have something left to save by the time we fix this bigger problem of climate change." He wants to be a scientist working on the animal he specializes. He doesn't want to have to write obituaries for the species that he would normally find himself caring for. It's testing, sampling. If coral only existed in captivity, it would be a very dark day for oceans. We don't know what that kind of world would look like, but we're getting there. I thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely and keeps me motivated in putting out climate-related videos like this on YouTube. I also have a Patreon. I would very much appreciate it, at the very least, joining at the free tier membership for the One Great Earth on Patreon. You can find the description, the link in the description of this video as well. All right. That is all I have on Florida right now. I thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Please take care. I did cover everything. All right, take care.